is Shiloh. My pronouns are he and him, and I'm the Affirming Ministries Coordinator of Edmonton, based out of the Robertson Wesley United Church. Today is Affirming Reflections Day, where I do a live stream once a month on the third Monday at noon. So welcome and thank you for tuning in. Today's topic, I guess, will be about the life and death of Harvey Milk. For those who don't know, Harvey Milk was a gay rights activist, a community leader, and a politician in San Francisco. He was born in 1930 in Woodmere, Long Island. He graduated from New York State College in 1951. He then later served in the U.S. Navy during the Korean War and unfortunately received an other than honorable discharge in 1955 for engaging in sexual acts with other enlisted men. In 1972, he moved to San Francisco, where he opened a camera store and soon gained a following as a leader in the gay community. So here on your screen is a photo of Harvey Milk. For much of his life, Milk stayed very quiet about his personal life. He had known since high school that he was gay, and even in the wake of an emerging gay rights movement at the time, he was very deliberate and careful about remaining on the sidelines and not gaining too much attention around his gay identity. But things had started, to turn for him towards the end of his time in New York. And this is where he befriended a number of gay radicals who were frequent around the Greenwich Village in San Francisco, or in New York, sorry. He then later had his popularity grew when he challenged the city's gay leadership at the time, where he personally thought that they were too conservative in their attempts to gain greater political rights for homosexuals. So in 1973, he declared his candidacy for a position in San Francisco Board of Supervisors. So we'll just transition back here. So yeah, and so 1973, he tried to get on the Board of Supervisors in San Francisco, but with little money and being a very novice politician, he unfortunately lost the election. But the experience did not deter him from trying again. So 2 years later, he narrowly lost a second election for the same seat, but by then Milk had become a political force. He was a very outspoken leader in the gay community at the time. He had a lot of political connections at that time now because of his past experience with trying to run. And one of the connections he had was San Francisco's mayor, George Moscone. And finally, in 1977, Milk, who is known as the mayor of Castro Street, finally won a seat on the San Francisco City County Board. He was inaugurated on January 9th in 1978, thus becoming the city's first openly gay officer, as well as one of the first openly gay individuals to be elected into office in the entirety of the United States. So he was quite a person who drove home kind of the firsts in our community. He was one of the first individuals to be elected, and he was unfortunately one of the first out folks because there's probably many elected officials prior to Milk who were just unfortunately not out or were living in opposite sexual orientation marriages. But yeah, so thankfully he was able to be elected as an out gay man, which is super, super interesting. So as a supervisor, he drove into more personal matters by spearheading a lot of the bills, such as a bill to ban discrimination in employment, housing, and public accommodations based on sexual orientation. So this was one of the nation's strongest gay rights measures, still to this day. And even until 2015, when the United States allowed gay marriage. So he was a huge spearhead in not only being public about his gay identity, being elected as a gay person, but also spearheading a lot of these bills and rights to avoid discrimination and harassment for being gay, lesbian, or bisexual. Unfortunately, Milk's ascension had come to an important time in the gay community. While many psychiatrics, same with like therapists and counselors, still unfortunately considered homosexuality as a mental illness. And so there was a lot of liberal support for gay rights, but there was also a lot of, I guess, fears and hatred towards gay folks at the time because of the rights that they were gaining. So we even see that with Milk's association with some of the mayor, for example, Mayor Moscone. Moscone was actually able to appoint several gay and lesbian folks to a number of high-profile positions within San Francisco. So it wasn't just Milk who was spearheading this; he was able to get a few others to join him in this ability to gain power, to gain a voice, and to be able to change some of these laws. On the other side of the mayor's, I guess, life, Mayor Moscone had also had a previous supervisor named Dan White. So Dan White was a Vietnam veteran and former police officer and fireman who was troubled by what he perceived as a breakdown in traditional values and growing tolerance of homosexuality. So he was very much one of the folks that clashed a lot with Milk. So he was actually part of the San Francisco City County Board in 1977, and he clashed with Milk on pretty much every policy issue, and he was usually the one that would vote against anything that Milk would bring to the table. Unfortunately, here you see on November 27th in 1978, so a year after he was elected into the city council, Dan White entered City Hall with a loaded .38 revolver. He avoided the metal detectors by entering through a basement window that had been left open. His first stop was at the mayor's office, where he confronted Mayor Moscone and began arguing with him. He wanted to be reappointed in the council, and Moscow refused to reappoint White, and so White then shot the mayor twice in the chest and twice in the head. White unfortunately then went down the corridor into Milk's office, where he then shot Harvey Milk twice in the chest, once in the back, and twice again in the head. Soon after, he then later turned himself in at the nearest police station where he actually used to work. White's trial was marked by what was known as the Twinkie defense. And this was because his lawyers claimed that Dan White was normally stable, but prior to the shooting, he abandoned his healthy diet and instead indulged in sugary junk food such as Coca-Cola, donuts, and Twinkies. And in a surprising move, the jury actually convicted White of voluntary manslaughter rather than murder because of this deterioration in diet, which for some reason caused him to want to murder people. And so, unfortunately, the case was closed. He was given only 6 years in prison. And a year after his release in 1985, Dan White committed suicide. So as a result, of White's downgraded conviction, there was peaceful demonstrators in the Castro Gay area, and where it happened to go outside of the city hall, and this protest for the justice of Harvey Milk then turned very violent. And there was more than 5,000 policemen that responded to this. They were entering nightclubs, armed with guns and assaulting patrons. And by the riot's end, there was 124 people that were injured, including almost 60 of them being police. And this episode is known as the White Night Riots. A fun fact about Harvey Milk, actually, is that the rainbow flag, which has been the universal symbol for the 2S LGBTQ people around the world now, its first introduction into the queer community was actually in San Francisco, at the United Nations Plaza for Gay Pride Day on June 25th of 1978, so just a few months before Harvey was murdered. It was designed by Gilbert Baker, who was an openly gay activist and artist, and he was actually commissioned by Harvey Milk, who was his friend at the time, to design a symbol for the queer community. So at that Pride, before the creation of the rainbow flag, the community was recently using the pink triangle as a symbol for the LGBTQ movement. But unfortunately, it represented a very dark chapter because the pink triangle was created by the Nazis during World War II, and this was a way to identify and stigmatize homosexuals in concentration camps, kind of the same way that the Star of David was used against the Jews at the time. And so because it functioned as a Nazi tool of oppression, Harvey Milk and others in the queer community in San Francisco didn't want to use this symbol anymore. And so Harvey asked Gilbert to create some sort of symbol, and thus Gilbert creating the rainbow flag that we still use today. After the assassination of Harvey Milk, there was actually a large demand for this rainbow flag. And so to meet the demand, the Paramount Flag Company began selling a version of the flag using a stock rainbow fabric, which had 7 stripes, the red, orange, yellow, green, turquoise, blue, and violet. And later now we see that we're usually only using 6 colors, the red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and violet, whereas now we're starting to see the trans flag with the blue, white, and pink, as well as the brown and black stripes to represent the trans and people of color in the LGBTQ community. And so Harvey Milk not only spearheaded a lot of the political aspects of being queer and going into office, he spearheaded a lot of the first and most strongest bans against discrimination for LGBTQ people. He was martyred as a queer activist, unfortunately being murdered due to homophobia, and again spearheaded the creation of the pride flag. So Harvey Milk had a lot of history in the queer community. Yeah, he was more focused in the United States, but even here in Canada, we have our own, Harvey Milks. But even the pride flag is something that we've been using here in Canada as well and all over the world. And so I thought it was very important to bring a little bit about Harvey Milk into the conversation, just so people know. Because of his awesome history, there was a bunch of books and movies that were created based on the story of Harvey Milk. And so there was a bunch of films and books. So the first being a 1984 documentary called The Times of Harvey Milk. This documentary actually earned an Academy Award as well as an opera, which I haven't seen. But there was another video or movie called Harvey Milk, which was created in 1995. And the most recent one being a movie called Milk. And it was created in 2008. And this cinematic depiction of his political career starred Sean Penn, which is an amazing actor. And so we'll take a look at this movie trailer with you. It wasn't until 2009 that Milk was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom. And unfortunately, he was awarded this medal prior to his, or post-death. And so I think it was his nephew that received that medal in his honor. So we'll watch a quick movie trailer for the 2008 movie called Milk, just so you can get a little bit of an idea of how things looked at the time, how Sean Penn played Harvey Milk, how Harvey Milk was influential in the queer community, and some of the notions around how society viewed homosexuality at the time. I think is really interesting that you can see that in the trailer. We'll watch that together right now.
If homosexuals are allowed their civil rights, and so would prostitutes or thieves or anyone else.
40 years old, and I haven't done a thing.
I'm not going to be forced out of San Francisco by social deviants and incorrigibles.
We need one of our own in office. We could have a revolution here.
I don't do losing. There she is, our new campaign manager.
You all scared of girls.
You'll be the first openly gay man elected to major office. So you're part of the machine now.
Society can't exist without a family.
We're not against that.
Can 2 men reproduce?
No, but God knows we keep trying.
If these people are going to live a life of such open homosexuality, they are going to be removed from their jobs.
We're gonna beat this thing. We need everyone.
We lose this. We'll have anti-gay laws in all 50 states.
Not like most homosexuals I know.
Do you know a lot of homosexuals, Dad?
Harvey Milk will be stabbed and have night horror.
Call the police.
They probably wrote it.
You have an issue.
It's more than an issue. This is our lives we're fighting for.
get the first bullet the minute you stand at the microphone.
You don't have to go up there.
All men are created equal. No matter how hard you try, you can never erase those words. That is what America is!
I want you to know I'm proud of you. Without hope, life is not worth living. You gotta give him hope. You gotta give him hope.